Hello, Formula One fans, and welcome to Fans Forum, the show where we put you in pole position, driving the conversation as we take a look at the whole melee that was the Monaco Grand Prix this weekend. Of course, we've got my VIP co-host once again, this time in the shape of a professional motorsport photographer. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you this morning, my dear? This evening. It's an evening, isn't it? There you go. Do you know what? I'm ecstatic because my football team won yesterday and we got promoted. So I don't know what day of the week it is in any realm. But how are you, Jordan?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And of course, the Monaco G-Prix, Grand Prix. We've just talked about Formula E. That's why. So for those of you that don't know, myself and Jordan were both at the Monaco E-Prix a couple of weeks ago, which is also why I thought it would be fitting that she joined me to talk about the Grand Prix that went on around the streets of Monte Carlo, because we walked those very streets, didn't we, my dear,
We
just a
did.
couple of weeks ago.
After I finally figured out how to get rid of my bike, we managed to do a little track walk, and that was a lot of fun.
So, in fact, tell me about your first impressions of Monaco, then walking around, and what was it like to soak it up there with all that history and heritage from a motorsport perspective?
I know people were like really up in arms when Oscar Piastri said this, but he said it was dystopian, and I actually really agree with him when he said that, because it's just such a weird juxtaposition from like France and Beausoleil down to Monaco, and like you can really just see the wealth and the history and how it's all blended into the city just all in one place, and it doesn't feel real. It feels like you're in another world. It was such a cool experience to have, but I think it took me a solid day to really get used to it because I just wasn't ready for it. I wasn't prepared for
Yeah, as you're
Monaco.
wandering around, because we met, and it is even surreal almost saying it in this conversation. So yeah, we casually met in Casino Square and then took a walk down to the Grand Hotel Hairpin and strolled along the tunnel. What was the best facts that you learned about the tunnel that I gave you?
That coffee machine, that Lavazza coffee machine that I definitely did use the next day for my, I think it was like 85 euros, like
Yeah,
85
the
cents
cheapest
on the
coffee
euro.
in
It was
Monte.
so cheap.
Yeah, the cheapest coffee in Monte Carlo exists in the tunnel. I don't know, maybe they haven't changed the price since they started racing there in 1929. Who knows?
It was really good though. So was not mad about it.
But listen, you guys that are in the chat box, once again, thanks for joining us. Our unofficial co-host, Gary, is there once again. We want your opinions on the Monaco Grand Prix with, of course, this new 2 mandatory pit stop format. Did you think it worked? I know Martin Brundle on the broadcasting said he didn't like it because motorsport, F1, is all about excellence. And from that, of course, he means speed. And you had this teamwork strategy that seemed to be split between each and every one of the teams. So in the chat box, let us know, what did you think of all the action from the Monaco Grand Prix yesterday? Jordan, for you though, what began your love affair with motorsport and Formula One?
So I've always been a sports person. I played football, like European football, not American football, like as a kid. And so I was always really into the strategy, the politics of sports. And then my partner actually got me into Formula One through through like the new Drive to Survive thing. It was pre-lockdown, but I was just kind of like, this is a new sport. I need something else to look at, especially while I'm working all day and just need something to do. And then I really fell in love with it because I got into the strategy, all the different like crazy things that have happened over time, like Crashgate, Spygate, all the different things. And I was like, this is kind of fun to watch and this is kind of cool. And so I think I definitely have progressed past the what people think of like a Drive to Survive fan. And now I do photography and I try to stay on top of everything because it's just so interesting. And I think there's never really a dull moment. I think the sport can get a bit more lively and a bit more exciting, but it's still a very fun sport.
Gary's saying here, team games all the way and not down to the individual drivers as such. So I'm assuming that Gary is very much in the Martin Brundle camp with his opinions on the Monaco Grand Prix. Let me ask you as well, though, Jordan, from your perspective as a professional photographer, do you watch the event differently to the rest of us?
I think I do. I was talking to my friends because they'd all come over to watch the race with us yesterday. And none of them have ever been in Monaco. None of them have actually, outside of my partner and a couple other people, have watched a Formula One race in its entirety. And so I was kind of talking them through where are the photo spots, like where can you go, where can you not go. I was telling them about how I skinned my knee on the track and just kind of giving them the background of what happened, like why is the tunnel so special. I was showing a couple of them like the Isaac Hadjar like near miss from last year's F2 race in Monaco.
Right.
And that was really, really exciting because I think they kind of got the storytelling aspect that I fell in love with. I think I do watch it a bit differently because I'm like, oh, that'd be a really cool picture. Oh, that'd be a really
Mm.
cool picture. And I think where Kimmy hit the wall on qualifying day. So there's so if the wall is here, there's actually a photo spot right behind it. At certain points, you could kind of see people milling about there, but you can sit or like squat on the track or dress off the track right there because it's pretty much impossible for a car to hit you.
On the
And
Nouvelle
so,
chicane, yeah. So just
yeah,
behind, it's like just behind as the car hits left. Yeah, that
yeah,
bit.
it's
Right.
pretty much impossible for like a car to flip all the way back around and like smack a bunch of photographers. And so they do let people stay there and take a picture. And it's one of the coolest photos I have from Monaco. And so I was like pointing that out to them. I was like, I've done that. That was really cool. And it's just really cool to see it from both perspectives, being in person there, but also at home seeing everything kind of as it's going on.
And just give us an understanding as well of how difficult it is logistically to move around the circuit then
Oh, it's
as
impossible.
well during a race. And you've got to remember as well, the E-Prix that we've been at, that's like a tiny scale compared to the F1 event.
And then it rained on Sunday.
Yeah.
So it poured. So and it rained on qualifying day as well, didn't it?
Did it? No, it
Yeah, I think
rained. It rained because all the events happened on one day. So the first
yeah,
day it was dry, and the second day it was wet. So
yeah.
Sunday was wet through all the sessions, including qualifying.
I could have sworn it rained at the end of qualifying. Like, because I remember getting really, really soaked 2 days in a row.
Right. No,
I don't
day
know
one it
why.
didn't rain.
No?
No.
Oh. Well, it was like I think qualifying was really interesting in Monaco because I actually really like how Formula E does qualifying in Monaco.
Yeah. The
Because
duel.
how they split it up makes a lot more sense because
Don't
you
you think?
don't end. Huh?
Don't you think that maybe I think for sprint weekends in Formula One, it would be a really good new way of adopting qualifying to again just change what happens.
Just something different,
Mm,
something just to zhuzh it up a bit because like with 20 F1 cars in their current state with the width of the cars, it's not possible to have a race in Monaco. It's not possible to really even have a qualifying in Monaco because people just do not have the space to overtake. It's not safe. In reality, like the only real places you can overtake are the bottom of the hairpin if you're really going for it,
yeah,
right before you go into the tunnel or on the straight, the main straight.
yeah.
But
We'll,
outside
we'll
of
talk
that, but
about
that's so short.
we'll talk about Gabriele Bortoleto and Kimi Antonelli actually swapping on that part, and Bortoleto paying the price for that. But Gary also saying that he thought it was an interesting watch from a team strategy perspective, and a suggestion for next year. One pit stop happening before lap 20. Gary, you were definitely listening to Martin Brundle, weren't you, over the
But I
weekend?
feel
Because
like
that's
that
what Martin
only
said.
works if you're not Mercedes and you don't forget about the two pit stops.
Yeah. So for yourself, Jordan, the new format, did it work for you? And what would you suggest maybe for 2026 in Monaco?
I don't think it worked, but I think it didn't work because it's a consistent theme that we've had in Monaco for the last really 3-ish years. The
Mm,
cars are too big to overtake. And so you can do exactly what Alonso did a few years ago, which is where you just cause a 30-second gap between you and the person behind you or the person in front of you. And it just makes the rest of the grid just like trundle behind you, waiting for you to make a mistake. But if you're like Fernando Alonso, I'm here for forever. I'm not going to make a mistake. I can do this track like the back of my hand. What's the point of that, in my opinion? And so I think the only real way to make that rule work is if you prevent that happening. Like you have to maintain a certain delta to the car in front. You can't just intentionally slow down. And while you can kind of say like, "Oh, I was just trying to avoid hitting the car. I had
Oh, we've lost Jordan, unfortunately, but we'll get her back as soon as possible. But a really interesting insight from her there, and great to hear around the Monaco circuit, because in Formula E, they do run the exact same circuit as Formula One. But as soon as Jordan comes back, we will get her back on the live stream as soon as possible. But again, jump into the chat box, guys. What did you make of the race across the weekend? And Gary saying, yeah, Martin Brundle made a lot of sense. So thanks once again, Gary, for being my unofficial co-host and stepping in there. So Jordan, Gary, who's a regular on the show there, just giving me some interaction in the chat box, and saying that Martin Brundle makes a lot of sense. But hey, maybe you gave him that info, eh, guys? But Jordan,
I don't know what happened. I was like, I'm still here, but it's just not. It didn't want to work.
So Jordan, let's get into the performances of the weekend anyway. So first and foremost, Lando Norris returning to the top step in Formula One, taking the checkered flag from pole position, announcing that he is still very much part of a title challenge and doing it in the best way, right? Letting his racing do the talking, taking pole with a lap record as well. What did you make of Lando's performance across the weekend?
I think his pole position lap was amazing. I will give him that. I think it was a stellar lap. I was really rooting for Charles because I was like, oh, it's his home race.
Yeah.
Absolutely gonna go. He's gonna go for it. But it was a beautiful lap. At the end of Q3, he really just fully sent it, and you can't take that away from him. I know people sometimes kind of try to be like, oh, he just got really lucky with the gap or whatever. No, that was a beautiful lap. And I can't like I don't think that's something people should just like mess around with. That was a beautiful, beautiful lap. I think he did a really good job of keeping Charles behind him, not making a mistake. I do agree with Oscar with what he said in the post race cool down, where he was like, I thought you were going to be in the wall at turn one when he locked up his tires.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised he didn't end up in the wall that day or that first lap.
Yeah, I guess as well, any other race circuit, he probably would have paid the price, right, with
Yeah.
his tires. But because of Monaco and you can
Yeah.
just cruise around, he got away with it. So it possibly still gives us a little insight to that. I don't want to use a negative word, but almost like fragility that
Yeah.
exists when the spotlight is on Lando.
Yeah. I think if this was any other track, Charles would have overtaken him. Because especially because I think you and I can like kind of visualize it because we've been to Monaco, but the run to turn one is so much shorter than other places. And there's not really any other place outside of that first turn where you can realistically overtake. And so I think he got really lucky that that was Monaco and that there's not really any other places that you can overtake. Because had it been anybody else, any other track, it wouldn't have. I think either Charles would have overtaken him and maybe even Oscar would have overtaken him on that start, but it's just not enough space in Monaco to make that happen and make that move kind of stick without potentially putting both yourself and the other car in the wall.
And he did manage to keep it on circuit and maintain the lead into turn one, has now cut the gap in the championship to just 3 points behind his teammate, Oscar Piastri. What do you think Oscar would have made of the weekend? And do you think he's the kind of individual that would have just been completely happy to do the strategy that McLaren imposed?
Like keeping them in a 1-2 or like a 1-3 setup.
It was a 1-3, and Oscar really kind of cruised, didn't he, to let a bit of a gap for Lando so Lando could get himself in a gap in the midfield when he pitted.
I think he kind of sacrificed him. I don't think that Oscar sacrificed Monaco to let Lando win, but I think he knows that that track is not the right track for him to like potentially try to overtake Charles and like try to put more points up because it's just not, you can't do much here.
Yeah.
And I think he was kind of lying in wait a bit towards the end, hoping to overtake Charles if he's made a mistake. But I think simultaneously, I think he's just waiting for Barcelona, and I think he'll be fine because I think this was Lando's week. Lando always has very good qualifying when he's having a good weekend. But I think if there's anything that's off throughout the weekend, he doesn't have a good qualifying. But I think that Oscar will have a decent qualifying in Barcelona, especially after this. And I think that'll significantly improve his probable weekend.
Look at that, Gary in sync with all hosts, it seems, across the broadcast. He's agreeing with you there, Jordan, that Oscar will come back strong in Barcelona next week as well. And you think Lando will also be looking good. I guess the question begs then, Jordan, this reminds me, so back in when was it? It was the 80s when it was Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet, and they kept taking points off of each other at Williams and eventually lost out in the championship to Alain Prost, I believe. When will the call be made for you at McLaren? When do they go, okay, we've got to favour one driver?
If I was Zach Brown and Andrea Stella, I would say you make the choice. Make the choice after Silverstone.
Right.
Because
okay.
Silverstone is a little bit further in the season to where you can kind of get away with waiting just a little bit longer. But it's also not too far where you end up in a situation where you can't come back from that. And I do think by that point, the two of them will have made it very clear. I don't think they can do kind of what they did last year where they waited realistically through Monza to make that kind of choice. I think waiting through Europe summer is too far. Waiting till its completion is too far. You kind of have to make a decision by the end of that, like well before that's over. If you want to put in some banker points for the person, because that's what Red Bull did with Max last year. They realized that there was going to be a downturn for them at some point in the season. Put in some banker points. Not that Checo was really putting up a fight, but making sure that neither Oscar or Lando had the option of even getting close to those kinds of points it helped Max in the end, and that's how he got his championship.
Yeah, because he won, was it 9 races overall last season, Max? Yeah. 7 in the first 10.
Yeah, it was it was all in the beginning.
Yeah, but banked all of his points early doors. And what about you guys in the chat box that are there? What way do you think it's going to go? What are McLaren going to do? And when do they make the call? There's only 3 points now between their two drivers. And at some point, they're going to have to decide who to support so that they don't miss out on that drivers' championship again. It's going to be an interesting season, that is for sure. Jordan, let's move it forwards then and discuss, I want to say, the team that possibly duped us a little during pretty much before the beginning of the weekend. They duped us. Sound bites from Charles Leclerc saying, well, we are no good in quali and slow corners. And then Charles headed up all of the practice sessions for the first time that a driver's done that since Mexico 2023, I believe. So they put a real statement down, and then he almost got pole.
Oh. Ferrari makes my heart hurt sometimes. Being a Ferrari fan is very difficult. I think Ferrari does well in this track because they have Charles, and because Charles knows this track like the back of his hand. And I think there comes a certain amount of comfortability and the ability to just really send it into those couple of corners that you need to make up time in a way that I think only Charles Leclerc can do. And while Lando also did that and got qualifying and got pole, I think this might be a bit of an outlier for Ferrari in terms of their performance.
Okay. So you're not expecting positive things for Ferrari next up in Spain then?
I think they're both a bit beat down at the moment. I think they need a good race to really pick themselves back up, but no, not.
What do you think Lewis Hamilton would have made of the weekend as well? I know he was very positive about the team and how they managed to turn the car around for qualifying. But it kind of felt like Lewis was in the middle of the grid having a race on his own. He was the only one outside of the top 4 that wasn't lapped. But I think he was 40-odd seconds behind them at the end of the race. He didn't even know what was going on. He asked his engineer, and the engineer started feeding him other information. And he's like, no, bro, can I catch them? What's going on?
I think they suffered with the communications errors that often happen in Monaco, where like there's so many radio signals, there's so many phones, since it's so densely populated that you just can't get a radio signal around there. And I think that really hampered his race, because I actually don't think he would have necessarily needed to be that far behind. And I think he probably could have made up a lot of that pace throughout the race if he'd really known about it, or Ferrari was serious about challenging Max and Oscar. because that was realistically like his race wasn't with Lando and Charles, it was with Oscar and it was with Max. But I don't think that Ferrari was really worried about Monaco in the way that I think they should have been, or they were waiting for a safety car, a red flag, something that would put them back in the fight. But I think realistically, safety cars don't really happen in Monaco anymore because they don't really need them because they're going so slow.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
you put it in the
it,
wall, you just put it in reverse.
mm. Interesting, though. I mean, it's not been the happiest of hunting grounds, has it, for Lewis Hamilton, Monaco? So the fact that it was a bit of a procession for him again is not a big deal. He will be hoping that the team begins some kind of upward trajectory. Are you saying, from your perspective, Jordan, you think it's going to still be a difficult, let's say, second two or third 2/3 of the season, and you don't expect great performance from the Scuderia until the new regs come into play?
I think they will improve towards the end of the season because I think that's sometimes what Ferrari does quite frequently. I think they improve as the season progresses, which a lot of teams do. But
Mm.
they always have such a hard start to the season. And I think it doesn't help for Lewis because he's new. And with Lewis being such a new face on the team, a new face in Ferrari, getting to know Italian and all of the things, he's always going to struggle this year more than I think he might struggle next year. But I think this year will probably remain pretty difficult for him.
Yeah, but we do, fingers crossed, hope for that 8th world championship,
I
don't
would
we?
love that. I would love if McLaren's engines just stopped working and then and he was just boop there. That would be fantastic. I would that rooting for that all day long.
And I'm assuming then a impromptu Max Verstappen retirement as well.
Yeah, just 2 or 3 of those would be great. Just a couple just to
So let's move it on anyway and talk about the defending champion Max Verstappen and his team Red Bull Racing. Max again squeezing the most he can out of that car. Again, it's not been the happiest hunting place for Max Verstappen. Only one win in Monaco, and that came from pole position.
yeah.
But it feels like generally the Red Bull setup is coming together now,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Do you expect to see them begin to fly? And what would you expect to see next in a more open Spanish Grand Prix, perhaps?
I think Yuki won't do as poorly as he did this weekend. I think he was kind of hampered, especially in qualifying, because he was on the same set of used tires and they never changed him off of those, as far as I remember. And to me, that just didn't make sense. I understand that they were trying to maintain tires because they have 2 pit stops, but simultaneously, you need to put a good lap in.
Mm.
And I think sometimes he's getting a bit sacrificed and then stuck in the middle of a grid. In a place like Monaco, you can't really afford to do that. And then he got in that accident with Pierre and it just spiraled out of control for him. So I hope that for Yuki's sake, he'll do better in Barcelona. I think Max will continue to I think Max might end up being the Prost in the situation with the McLarens if they keep picking points off of each other. I think that they'll hate that. McLaren and Zach Brown and Andrea Sella will absolutely hate if that happens, but it's a very real possibility. I think I said at the beginning of the season that that is a possibility for both Max Verstappen and actually George Russell. Outside of this weekend when George and Mercedes did really, really poorly, he's relatively consistent in terms of where he places.
Mm.
And so I think if the two of them just kind of maintain that P3, maybe a P4, the occasional P2 podium positions, they could very easily take the driver's championship off of them.
Big shout out to Rihanna, one of our previous guests on, and she's shouting you out as well, Jordan. So it's great to have some motorsport family in the chat box. Thanks for showing your support, Rihanna, once again. Jordan, just to do a bit of an overview on Yuki Tsunoda, what have you made of him since he's gone into that Red Bull seat? Is it less about him and his performance and more about exposing the difficulties of that car for you?
Ooh. I think I think the bar is lower for Yuki. I think he. Oh, why is my camera keep unplugging?
We can still hear you though, my
You can
dear.
hear
But
me,
do
but you
your thing
can't
and see if
see
you
me.
can sort it out, and that's not a problem at all. But
There you
oh,
go.
you're back. Here we go. And yeah, so for you, Yuki Tsunoda.
I think Yuki is definitely suffering from that car, but I don't think it's necessarily a Yuki problem as much as it is a car problem,
Right.
which is a sad thing to say because I want him to do really well in that car because I think he should have gotten the seat in the first place.
Mm.
And I think he's kind of suffering because he didn't have the exposure in the first place. He was trying to stay in the V carb. They weren't going to move him, but then simultaneously, now he's there and he's having to make up for lost time almost.
So you don't feel there's that much pressure on Yuki Tsunoda at the moment?
I think it's kind of the same as like Franco. Don't crash, score a couple points, and go from there.
Okay, well, that in mind, then let's just move our attention forwards to the Racing Bulls, who had, I don't think I'm using too much of a word when I say a fantastic race weekend. Well, what would you say about that? I mean, double points, what that must have done for the mentality of Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar scoring his best ever points position finish and the best finish in Monaco for the team. They got to be pretty buoyant, haven't they?
I think Isaac did really, really well. Like the way that he held up that kind of P5, P6 window during the race was incredible. I think he drove pretty solid, especially coming off of a crash as a rookie in Monaco during practice. And I think he did quite well. Um, Liam got some of his first points, which is always a good sign for him. And I think that will be I think I worried at the beginning of the season when they did switch them around if Yuki was just a temporary replacement for Liam.
Mm.
But I do think that Yuki might stay in that seat, and I think Liam might stay at V carb. I think he will do a bit better at V carb than he would in a Red Bull.
You can see people in the chat box have got Rihanna saying, Isaac, so much talent. Gary, Isaac, another good race. What about
I
the performance of Isaac Hadjar? Does that cause a problem within the Red Bull family? Or would they be stupid to put all that spotlight and pressure on the young man after what's happened to others?
I think Isaac is definitely rookie of the year for me, at least midway through the season where we are. Um, I think Red Bull needs to learn from their mistakes of pushing drivers too fast. And I think that's something they struggle with in terms of they keep trying to push and push and push. Stop pushing. Let a rookie be a rookie. Keep them in your junior team for a few years. Grow them and nurture them into an actual top team driver before moving them and then make that choice.
And what about you guys out there? What do you think? Isaac Hadjar, too early for the Red Bull second seat. Let us know what you think in the comments box. Interesting, Jordan. I get why you say that completely from a human perspective, but
Yeah.
we have to remember that this sport is big business, and Red Bull can't afford to keep finishing in P3 in the championship, where they currently find themselves once again, right, with what you would argue is the best driver on the grid. So what do they do about that problem then? It's almost like from what you're saying, just sacrifice the second seat and let people learn in there, but they need to bring in the tens of million.
I think they need to fix the car. Like I I think Drive to Survive was I think as much as people made fun of Toto Wolff at the time when he was talking about Checo says the car is messed up. I have it printed out. Um, I think he was right. I don't think it's a driver problem because they've gone through Checo, who's a great driver, Liam Lawson, and Yuki Tsunoda.
And then before
In
that, Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly.
and Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly, like like the first three, like in the last year.
Mm.
Like you've gone through three great drivers in the span of a year. That's insane. And
Yeah.
Daniel Ricciardo, like you can go back like a half a decade, but like Max is the only person who can drive that car. You either need to find someone who drives just like Max, and hire them to drive that car, or you need to fix the car. And Max needs to learn how to be a team player in that one. Not that I don't think that Max wouldn't be a team player, but I think if you're basing the car around one person to the point that you don't even get in the points for the second one, there's a problem.
Yeah, yeah, too true. And the chat box is very much backing you up, my dear Gary, saying Isaac just needs to be left for the rest of the year, possibly the Red Bull second seat for next year. Even that might be a bit too early.
I wouldn't rush him.
I love Rihanna with her pit stop plates. If anybody out there hasn't followed it so far, let him marinade, because we know that any good meal and good meats needs marinating overnight, doesn't it, Jordan?
Yes, it does. I think that Yuki might go to Honda. She just mentioned, I wonder what will happen when Honda's gone. I think Yuki might leave and go to Aston when Aston takes over with Honda.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics that goes on behind the scenes that we aren't privy to. And that's the reason why we love it and we talk about it so much, because we don't really know what's going on. But hey, listen, we can all say what we'd do if we were the likes of Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, etc. A surprise package of the weekend, well, in the sense of getting themselves into point scoring positions, returning back to point scoring positions after 3 races in a row with no points. Haas, courtesy of Esteban Ocon. What a great performance from the small American outfit this weekend, Jordan. What did you make of what they did and how Esteban went about his business?
Esteban had a great race. I think Esteban is constantly overlooked as a really good driver because he's been in really bad teams.
Mm.
Yeah,
we got to remember he came through the Mercedes Drivers Academy, didn't he?
But he was with, like, I think in terms of like where he's been in like a full-time seat, like being with Alpine for so long. And I don't think, even though he's their only race winner.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can't remember. Where did he win? He won in, I can't remember where, but
that was
he's always been well thought of. And even if you go back to Drive to Survive and what we saw behind the scenes when it was Racing Point, the only reason that he lost his seat was because Checo came with all the Mexican money, right? But he still carved out a good career for himself and a good coup for Haas, getting him in the seat in the first place. But yeah, had a very good race. And at the other side of the garage, Oliver Bearman, we talk about the 6 rookies that are on the grid. How do you think he's done so far? Because there was a lot of noise about Ollie Bearman, wasn't there? Scoring twice for Ferrari and Haas last year. But he's had a lot of issues this year. Back-to-back penalties as well in the race for the young man.
I think if Ollie Bearman had not had the situation he had last week with the with the red flag and his qualifying lap, I don't think they would have been as harsh on him this weekend.
Right.
Because it's 2 instances in a row where I think he did let off last week, but there's still 2 very closely linked instances of him versus a red flag and causing some sort of controversy that I think has kept the FIA's attention. I think a 10 place grid penalty in Monaco is a bit much. But I do think he also overtook under a red flag, and that's a big no-no. And so I think it's a balancing act of he's a rookie. I think he's still figuring it out. But simultaneously, these are things you learn in F2, in F3, in Formula 4 even. You cannot overtake under a red flag.
Yeah.
And I think he's struggling to figure this out and struggling how to find the balance between what he knows and what he doesn't know. And I think he needs to find that balance a bit faster than what he's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are huge, aren't they? And we have to remember that. That's why it matters, particularly the one last week where it's like, oh, well, what's the big deal? It's the start-finish line. I just need to get this lap in or I'm out in Q1 again. But I guess the FIA and the stewards, they need to also set the boundaries for safety, don't they?
Yeah. Because, I think when they were talking about his lap last weekend and the controversy surrounding it, to be fair to Ollie Bearman, I think normally they do hesitate. They'll put out a double yellow before they put out the red flag and give them if someone's finishing a flyer, barring someone is like they'll put out a double yellow in the actual sector where someone is, and if then they'll let the person who's on the flyer, if you're like right at the end of that last sector, finish the lap. And I think that was kind of what Haas was expecting them to do. And so I think that was what they were expecting. That's why he was expecting to finish the lap. And it was so close to the line of when they put out that red flag. I don't even think he would have been able to stop, even if he wanted to.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Ollie, but like you said, it's the teething, it's the learning process that you have to go through as a rookie and understand that there are rules to be adhered to, right? And yes, you are on a start-finish straight, but we don't want to get these guys are elite athletes, and any millisecond that they can get, they will take. We can't have that in a high-speed corner for the same argument, right? Because that could lead to something catastrophic. And I always find it interesting, and we must forget, and you even hear it when the drivers are talking in press conferences sometimes, and they say, oh, well, obviously they want more excitement, more jeopardy. And really, a lot of the time what we're saying is more incidents. And we have to remember that these are people, and they're in fact risking their lives every time they get in that race car, aren't they?
Yeah.
So Gary's opinion on it, just saying he thinks that Ollie needs to relax a little bit. He's just trying to over-impress. And yeah, you know what, Gaz, I'd agree with you there, because thinking about early in the season, Haas had a little run, didn't they, where I think they scored points for 3-4 races in a row.
Yeah.
But before that even, Ollie had a couple of incidents in free practice sessions and in Q1s pushing too hard, and you're like, just ease it up. And do you think, Jordan, actually, give me, your perspective, if you was one of these rookies, would you be keeping your eye on the other rookies and you see the performances of the likes of Isaac Hadjar and Tonelli going pretty quietly and positively amongst his business? Do you think Ollie's putting unnecessary pressure on himself, perhaps?
Yes and no. I actually don't think Ollie's putting the pressure on himself. I think the teams are putting the pressure on them unintentionally and intentionally, because you have the Red Bull situation where you can't even finish a full season. Liam Lawson technically, well, not like you can argue about it, but he's never finished a full season in Formula One. He's not. And he went from Daniel's seat for half a year the first time, then he got Daniel's seat for the rest of the season again, and then he got the Red Bull seat for like 3 races.
Yeah.
That's insane. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on you and even like Williams, because Williams wasn't that good at the time. Williams and Logan Sargent, they're not allowed to just, I think there's a difference between sucking as a driver and not being very good, and trying to find the balance and learn how to drive the car without worrying about, oh, if I mess up one more time, am I going to lose my seat?
Yeah, it's just the cutthroat element of it. Gary saying here about maybe the rookies should concentrate more on their own business, not worry what everyone else is doing. Just to put my 2 pence worth in, I just want to go again from a business perspective. That's what we have to remember, right? And all the partners that want success. And you mentioned, Jordan, some people that have fallen foul of that. Even before that, we think about Mick Schumacher, even before Logan Sargent, and then the pressure that Mick all of a sudden became under. And I know that he was having incidents and it was costing money as well with the car, but everyone wants to be associated with F1 from a business perspective. And then when they're associated, they don't want to be the ones around in P17, P18, do they? They want to be scoring points and tasting a little bit of that success. So it's a fine balance.
I think you have to know the team you're in. Like if you're in a bottom 4, bottom 5 team, the likelihood of you being on a podium is low, but it's not low enough that you can just send it into a corner and run into people every weekend. Like, I know Pierre had an issue with the brakes. There was no reason for him to run into the back of Pierre or in the back of Yuki last weekend. There wasn't. And I think there has become a situation where like people are just trying so hard to improve and to like make it onto a podium and like get points where they possibly can, because they're constantly being told 1 point is the difference in millions and millions of pounds in prize money. where they almost end up causing more incidents and causing more crashes because they're trying to overcompensate for that. Because they're putting so much pressure on them to just like score a singular point. And it's like, let the point come to you at some point. If someone crashes, there's one. If one of the top teams crashes, that's one less. That's one more spot that one of the bottom field teams can take for points.
Yeah, too true. I mean, we're seeing that, aren't we? Even in qualifying continuously this season, that once upon a time when there were only 2 spots perhaps in Q3, there now feels like there's 4 or 5 on some occasions. But the word that comes to mind when you're saying all these things, Jordan, and I'm going to use it to segue to talk about the next team, is patience. And a team that has had patience with investment, with Liberty Media, sorry, not Liberty Media, with Doralton Capital going into there a few years ago now, wasn't it 2020, 2021? But now we are seeing, if you put in a foundation at a team and you have patience with the project, you get the right people at the helm, what is possible? Williams now celebrating 4 races in a row with double points. I mean, what a season they're having. What have you made of it so far? And where do you think it could end up, Jordan, for Williams Racing this year?
I was a bit annoyed that Alex was driving so slow with the 2 pit stop strategy. I agree. I think they were the winners of the team game this weekend because
From Gary there, yeah.
I think it makes the most sense for how they did it. I still found it really annoying because I don't think they should have been able to do like 20, 30-minute long gaps between the car in front.
I saw a little bit of gossip saying that James Vowles texted Toto Wolff during the race.
He didn't text him. He yelled at him.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you know that secondary pit straight or like going along the pit lane, James was walking on it and Toto was up in their little booth.
And he was like,
they were like, after George cut the chicane.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I found that hilarious. There's a video of it somewhere online. I'll find it and I'll send it to you.
Brilliant. But yeah, Williams, another good result. And you do what you need to do from a strategic perspective, and they did it. Again, Carlos Sainz would have been happy to play that role. I mean, he only finished 1 place behind his teammate, didn't he? But if there's anybody you'd ask to do that, it feels that any environment Carlos Sainz goes into, he is a very willing team player, isn't he?
I don't think he was that willing this weekend. I was listening to the team radios for Williams, and it seemed like he was just like, I don't want to switch back, because they had switched at one point. And it wasn't seeming like he wanted to switch back to P9, P10, which is where they ended up. And he was like, can we just wait for the race to finish how it's supposed to? I'll do it eventually, trying to really argue with the team about finishing and like not making them do the switch. I think they were doing it around lap 50. And I understand that, but I also think that if Alex was currently higher, Alex started higher in Monaco, you have to let him keep that seat. And I think he's trying to prove himself at Williams and prove that he is the top driver at Williams. So then he can potentially move somewhere else eventually. But I don't
think he'll need to do that with the performance of Williams at the moment. Do you think he needs to do that? Do you think that's not a organization that could be heading places, like considering how they're currently performing?
I don't think they'll prioritize him though.
Oh, so you mean selfishly from a driver's perspective?
Yeah.
Like, all right, let me ask you another question. Is it realistic that Carlos Sainz is going to win a driver's championship in his career then? What do you... Right, okay, but I guess you have to believe.
That was a quick answer, no.
Yeah, as an elite athlete, I guess you have to believe in yourself. But you think he could still make what, like a Daniel Ricciardo to Renault move almost?
The thing with Carlos is I don't know where he would go. He can't go to Mercedes because Mercedes has George and Kimi. He can't go to Red Bull. He probably won't go back to Ferrari. He probably won't go to Aston. And I don't think there's a team that will take him.
Right. So you've almost counteracted your own opinion there.
I know. Yeah.
So you've said, I think Carlos is trying to do well to get out. And then you're like,
I think if an opportunity presents itself, I think he would leave.
Yeah. So Gary making a good point. And I think that when the radio messages that we were listening to, Alex wasn't right behind him. So I think in Carlos's defense, that's why he was saying, right, yeah, let the race run out first, because, you know, when it happens and he's directly behind me, I'm happy to switch. But at the moment, Gary's saying George Russell was in between them. But I had a sense that perhaps he wasn't immediately behind.
Okay.
Makes a little bit more sense, and it softens almost.
Yeah, it softens what I was, because I think when they played it back on the stream, it was like, it seemed like very different to the timing was off.
Yeah, well, you always get it usually like a couple of minutes after, isn't it? Because obviously you've got a producer listening to each one and going, "What one should we play? Oh, yeah, play this one." And
how do we bleep this one out?
Yeah, but Alex Albon, like you said, though, you're looking to perhaps see Carlos Sainz as a number one driver one day at Williams. But would you say it is Alex Albon at the moment? Points in 7 of the 8 races so far. I think he's got more points now than the 2 previous seasons combined already. Let me ask you about Alex Albon. Would Alex Albon be happy at Williams? Could his head be turned? Could he ever be a world champion? There we go. 3 questions in one.
I don't think he'd be a world champion. I actually don't think Alex's head would be turned, because Williams was a team that really picked him up after the whole Red Bull debacle.
Right.
And I don't think it's because he owes them, but I think it's because he's grown with that team. He really loves that team. And I think he wants to stick it out with them. I think if the situation changed and they did start prioritizing Carlos to Alex's detriment, that's a very different situation. And I think he would leave.
Yeah. Okay. And then do you think he might turn around saying, "Come on, guys, you know, we built this together. This is our house." And now all of a sudden, Mr. Ferrari, or used to be Mr. Ferrari, starting to throw his weight. But you know what? I just can't see Carlos Sainz doing it, to be honest, behind closed. When I think about all the teams that Carlos is involved with and has been throughout his career, he always seems like Mr. Nice Guy. They always make great content together, the 2 teammates. They always end up being bezies. So I think, what do they call themselves? Is it Albano or something like that? Yeah, I think that there's going to be good times for Williams coming in the future. And I think
they'll do really well
with both those drivers. I think, both those drivers.
The combination is very strong for where they are in the field.
Yeah, so let's see how they get on, and hopefully that they will stay friends at Grove there in Oxfordshire. A team that perhaps it was a weekend to forget, though, Jordan, the Silver Arrows, Mercedes. It's been a very good season, I would say, thus far, in a sense of the expectation after losing a 7-time world champion. But it was a horror show in qualifying, wasn't it? Kimi Antonelli ruining a lot of people's last flying lap on Q1 and then couldn't take part in Q2 himself. But then George with a power unit issue. And in the race, they were just ended up in that train and couldn't do anything behind Carlos Sainz.
I think I was surprised. I was not surprised when they told George to cut the corner. And
no, they didn't tell him to cut the corner. They told him to give the place back. And he went, "No, you know what? I'm going to go for it." And then again, when we're talking about the boundaries, the stewards hit him hard, didn't they?
Yeah, the drive-through penalty. I was not surprised by that. I was like, you have to give him something worse than a 5-second penalty for that.
Yeah. Okay. So, but in the future, you'd like to see a regulation that wouldn't allow Albon to drive like that in the first place.
Yeah. Like, I don't think Alex should have been able to drive that slowly. But I also don't think, I think that the expectation should be clear that if you cut the corner behind someone like that, you get a drive-through penalty.
Yeah, I wonder how it sits. I'm not familiar with the intricacies of the regulations, but Kimi Antonelli had to cut the same corner to avoid a collision in the same scenario, gave the place back. I wonder if there's anything in the regs currently, because that is endangering another driver, isn't it? If you are, it's no different to, you know, these insurance scams that started happening many years ago where people just in front slam their brakes on. Yeah. Theoretically, he's doing that during a race because that's completely unexpected from these drivers who know exactly every inch of the circuit, what the racing line is, and where the braking points are.
I I don't know.
But you want to see something anyway in the regulations that if that happens again, what would you say? What, like a 5-second penalty if you are caught to be decelerating substantially before corners, etc.?
I think it has to be more than 5.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
at that point, like, because I think there were so many people doing it, you had like 2 or 3 30-second gaps at any point.
Yeah.
Because I think Lewis's gap was a bit different because that was because he got caught behind someone before the pit stops.
Mm.
So that wasn't like an intentional gap that he was maintaining necessarily. But I think if you're doing that kind of like gap building for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 laps, you have to, I feel like you can't do that anymore because it's a waste of everyone's time and it's a waste of the tires, it's a waste of fuel, it's a waste of the street track, and
the resources. Everyone's worried
yeah,
about being green nowadays. What's the point of the event if we're not racing?
and and I understand doing it for the team game, but I think there comes a point when the team game needs to be squashed a bit.
Yeah, I do agree. And I return to Martin Brundle's point about, this is the top echelons of motorsport. It's about excellence, which is the need for speed, right? We want to see the pinnacle of engineering going as quickly as it can, not being tactical so your mate can get a free pit stop in front. So we're almost coming up towards our hour, Jordan. But before we do, let's just touch base on 3 teams that there wasn't much to report across the weekend, really. First up, we'll start with Stake Kick Sauber and how they got on. And then the most interesting thing, really, was that first lap incident between the rookie Gabriele Bortoleto and the other rookie Kimi Antonelli. So first up, a great move around the outside of the hairpin, but then probably showing his inexperience. He should have then made that car as wide as possible into Portier, rather than returning to the racing line, and he got done and he was in the wall.
I was so sad for him that time. Gabriel Bortoleto has. I think this is not his year. I think he did really well enough too.
I was really happy to see that he's definitely got a year next year as well. I was watching something, I can't remember what it was, but I didn't know what his contract situation was. And I was like, brilliant, because this year is a nothing year for both these drivers, isn't it?
I think between him and Nico, I don't think that this year really counts. It's like almost like a floater year between like Sauber and Audi. And I think it's just get comfortable with the team. You're both new to the team. You're both new to this organization. We're going to be making a lot of changes. We need you to on top form. Have fun, happy racing, score a point or 2 if you can. If not, we'll see you next year.
Don't crash the car too much.
Don't crash the car too much.
Yeah, it must be a nice environment to be able to get your feet under the table and grow. On the other side of the table, though, maybe a place not to do that is at Alpine. So we'll return to that quote from Flavio Briatore, which is, be fast, score points, and don't crash the car. Pierre Gasly, after not crashing or causing any incidents for his team in the whole of 2024, has had 2 already, both with Yuki Tsunoda. What did you make of this one, Jordan? Was he too close to Yuki, or did Yuki decelerate too early?
I saw him talking about it at the end and saying that it was Yuki's fault. And I was very confused about that. I think for him, I need to understand I would need to understand when the brakes exactly failed coming out of the tunnel.
Oh no, he said. I saw there was in the post retirement little interview that they did during the race.
Yeah.
He said no, my brakes were fine. I lost them
after he hit the collision.
Yeah, so there was no issue. It's just like you said. It's probably another incident where, being so used to the circuit, people are driving at 3/4 pace, which means the braking zone for the corner is completely different, and you need to be ready to react to that.
I don't even like him going into the back of him didn't make sense because there's a corner coming. You know that you need to be on the brakes soon. I don't know why he waited so late, but I don't think it was Yuki's fault.
No, I mean, also everyone knows that everyone's driving at this
Yeah,
delta
this
half
reduced
pace.
space, like
So
reduced speed.
you don't need to be right up the backside of the guy in front. You can leave some space because at any point you've got your own extra capacity to use. So yeah, maybe that's about tire management because if you get right behind the car in front, the air is less turbulent. Whereas if you sit, I think they usually say that they want to clear between 5 and 6 seconds for the air not to be turbulent. And then if it
Yeah.
is, you're eating into your tires more. So again, there's a strategic game with staying close enough to not wear your tires, but not too far away that you are. But then you don't want to be too close in case that a random braking point happens. It's difficult.
I think my issue with Pierre wasn't even him and Yuki. I think it was him not stopping after he had that big collision because
Gary in sync again, saying exactly the same thing.
it is so dangerous. It reminds me of actually hi. It
Yeah,
reminds
Lucy,
me of
another previous guest just jumping in. It's lovely to see the whole community coming together like this and you guys and everyone knowing each other. And it's one of the reasons I started this show, just to, as a more experienced head, should I say, amongst you younger cats, just to be a part of this collective and feel this emerging talent that's coming through. So, props to all of you youngsters.
it reminds me of IndyCar qualifying with that big crash and how he took a massive chunk out of the asphalt that had to be fixed.
Mm.
Him continuing to drive on the track was so dangerous.
Yeah.
It could have popped anybody's tires with all of the debris coming off. He could have ended up stopped in the middle of the track and caused another collision. I think that it just wasn't worth him continuing to trundle all the way around the rest of the track.
Lucy, great to have you here. She's just saying that usually she can't make a Monday evening, but she's here to listen to your expertise tonight, Jordan.
All of my opinions.
Yeah.
I think he should have stopped. And I think he should have pulled over closer to where he had the accident, even if that meant a red flag. Stop the car.
Yeah, it's so difficult. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and in a sense of maybe he's told them about the collision. Maybe they're then looking at where Colapinto is on the circuit to how much a red flag aids him, and then if it doesn't, they're saying no, keep going. Because you're right, putting the debris all across the circuit is something that nobody wants.
Because I remember seeing like the visuals of the front runners coming across that crash. And I was like, I'm really surprised none of them got a puncture from it.
Yeah, there was a point where Piastri had to take real evasive action, I think, in the swimming pool section. And then because of it as well, I think Max got right up behind him because Max was right on the cusp of a double yellow. Yeah. It caused so many issues, really, that it didn't need to. A good point that was made in the broadcast was the collision happened at the Nouvelle Chicane. Yeah. He could have carried on straight down an exit route there, and he's straight off the circuit.
I don't know why he didn't go off. And I don't know what was the thought process, because it's not that he didn't know that the entire front left, I think.
Yeah.
Was just useless.
Here we go. Let me make a point though in his defense. So let's say that happens, then he pulls the brake and nothing's happening. Is he then better to stay on circuit because the momentum of that car can slow down? Because that exit route only goes so far. There are going to be stewards and people down there. So in his defense, it might be that he can come to a slow stop more safely on the circuit than down an exit route.
I think there's another exit route for if he has to continue. There's another exit further down. But he still went past that one as well.
Right.
Okay. He went past both of them. And I think by the second one, he was going slow enough that it would have just been safer for him to stop, or like just kind of do what George did, where you just coast to an eventual stop, even if you don't know where that kind of is. Because then you have the expectation of the car is here. And it's not like the car is continuing to go and it might continue around these corners until we maybe stop.
Was that a little mock British accent I heard then?
No, my mock British accent is a lot better than that.
Brilliant. Yeah, so let's just talk on the other side of that garage then real quick. Franco Colapinto. Thoughts, feelings, suggestions?
I think he just needs to calm.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like a difficult start for him, doesn't it?
I think he was expecting to come in like he came in with Williams, even though he had a really rough start with Williams. But I think he was expecting to build off of that momentum and not have it be as difficult with Alpine.
Yeah. Gary just backing up saying Alonso did the right thing when he broke down straight down the exit route to avoid the yellow flag. But yeah, Colapinto, did you think there's any weight in these rumours, this 5 race thing? And I've seen rumours that Mick Schumacher's then got a contract for 5 races after that. And could you see a future in F1 where there's rotating seats?
No, I think there's a rule against it.
Oh, okay.
There's a rule that prevents them from doing that, thankfully, because that would honestly grind my gears.
And I guess
I hate the whole swapping thing. It's my biggest pet peeve because you committed to somebody, you need to commit.
Let's move it on. Final team, who are definitely both committed to their drivers, perhaps for differing reasons, but that is not for us to comment on. Fernando Alonso still seems like the most unlucky effing man in the world, as he put it in the last race, riding along in the points and then had to retire. I don't know what the problem was with the car, but Fernando, 8 races in, no points. We wouldn't have expected that, would we?
No, I think I felt really bad when he retired because I had just said that. I had said like literally 2 minutes prior to that. He's driving so slow. Maybe he'll just retire and I won't have to worry about it.
Hang on. The last 2 races, that car seems that something's happened to it, and
I think something happened as well this time. I don't think it was a change from the past 2 races, but I think this time I felt really bad about it.
Yeah, Lucy saying as well, utter heartbreak for Alonso and Aston Martin. Yeah, it's been a tough season for them.
I don't know if he'll stay though. I think he might leave.
Really? No, come on. With an Adrian Newey car, I think he will give it 1 season in 26, surely.
I don't know if he wants to though.
What, leave the series completely or join another team?
I think he'll leave the series. I think he might retire from F1. Because I think he's tired. Not in a bad he's tired and exhausted kind of way, but in a he's been racing in F1. He's been racing with Aston for so long. I think he just might want to do something else.
Yeah.
Fernando Alonso loves a side quest.
There is a different kind of fatigue, though, when you're not winning, right? And when you're not scoring. He seemed like
points as well.
He seemed and felt like a sprightly 20-odd-year-old in 2023 with his multiple podiums. So give him a car, and then that is performing well. All of a sudden, he'll be back on dates with Taylor Swift, I assure you. But we will wait and see. And they've said that Adrian Newey's taken a look at that car as well, the 2025 car, and they've had a couple of good qualifying stints for the last 2 races. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in Spain. And that's where we will be turning our attention to next, the Grand Prix in Spain. So it's not going to be happening there, is it? This is the last one that's happening in Catalonia, I believe, before they move it to Madrid.
No, there's 1 more year. There'll be a year of doubles.
Yeah. Okay,
they'll have 2 Spanish races for 2026, which is weird.
Right. Okay. So Madrid for the first time, but Catalonia will still be on the circuit.
Apparently, so. That is the way that the contracts are written. I will be surprised if that actually maintains what happens.
We will see. But for you, Jordan, what way does it go? How are you feeling about the Spanish Grand Prix? What do you expect to see?
I think Oscar will. I think Oscar will win. I think Lando will be on pole.
Okay, so what? Because of a mentality thing again for you?
I think Oscar does really well in races where you can overtake, and I think Catalonia might be a better race for him.
And what about the talent that is Max Verstappen in a Red Bull and the Silver Arrows? Do you expect them to bounce back? And the Ferraris, Jesus, they're all there. See what they're going to do.
I'll do 1, 2, 3. I think 1 Oscar, 2 Max, 3 Lando.
Oh, okay. Right, so Max Verstappen splitting the papaya once again. But we will be back to review that as well in the week following. So you guys out there, thank you so much for joining us again as part of the Fans Forum. And Jordan, thank you for being on the show. Have you enjoyed yourself?
I did. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. And for any of you guys watching this, that watch live or are watching any of the stuff that we post out online, make sure you follow her as well for some great motorsport shots. And I'm sure she's up for any kind of employability that's coming her way too as well, right?
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Yeah, it's not bad if you can travel with your job to race circuits all around the world like that girl.
I'd love to do it.
Good stuff. But you guys out there, we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's Fans Forum. Next week, as I said, it's the last of the triple headers. We're heading to Spain, Catalonia. Who's going to win it? Jordan thinks it's going back to Oscar Piastri. But either way, we'll see you soon. Take care.